Thanks very much for speaking to me. It's good to see you.
Of course. Good to see you.
So, I mean, first of all, congratulations on the book. It's I've just finished it now. It's I loved it to bits.
You just finished it like right before the
Just,
interview?
yeah, pretty much so. Yeah, yeah. I just finished. I've started reading just before the weekend. I've just managed to finish it in time now. Yeah,
Well, good timing, I guess.
but no, it was great. I'm quite curious about I was looking at kind of interviews that you've done previously, and you've often said that you're kind of a skeptic in real life, but at the same time, you
Mhm.
said that kind of the brain is powerful enough to kind of make a place feel haunted if we
Yes.
expect it to be. So I'm quite curious if there was something specific that happened to you, maybe that that kind of inspired you to
Mhm.
write about this specific place that has so much agency without giving too many spoilers away.
No, I mean, I am a skeptic for sure. When I was very young, I was like super credulous. I was like one of those kids who like believed Freddy Krueger was real, you know. And as
Oh,
I got
talk to me
and
about Freddy Krueger. That was my worst nightmares with Freddy Krueger when I was about 11 or 12. Yeah.
And as I got older, I would say I became more skeptical of more things. And now I'm down to I'm skeptical of everything. No, I haven't, I did not had a haunted experience. I do think a lot of times you go to a place and you expect it to be haunted, so you feel spooked. I think that your brain does a lot of work there. But I wanted to write this story because the way I write is that I sort of see an image in my head, or maybe like I hear one line of dialogue, and then, like a completely normal person, I just write a book so I can find out what it is.
Right.
So in this case, I saw three boys go into a house, I saw two come out, and I wanted to know who they were, so I wrote a book.
Right. That sounds a little bit. It's quite curious that you said that. It reminds me a little bit of I don't know if you've seen the recent film Weapons.
Yes.
And he said the director he just came up with this idea of these kids running out of the house and
Hmm.
wanted to know why they were running out of the house all of a sudden and kind of the story sparked from there. So I'm guessing it was something similar, no?
Yeah, so that's pretty much how all of my books have been, where
Oh,
like I
really?
see something in my head and then I think, oh, you know, what is that? And then I have to write a book so I can find out what it is. So
Uh-huh.
it's Zach Krager, right, is the director of Weapons. So
That's
he
right. Sorry. Yeah.
obviously, right, so he was probably like, I must make a movie to find out what this is, right?
Mhm. So I'm quite curious. I mean, so you've got this idea,
Hmm.
but then I'm curious how you approach it because there's certain. I mean, the main character called Jessie. She's an aspiring journalist, and like a
Hmm.
lot of the book is kind of her collating lots of memories and data from different people. So I'm quite curious how you went about writing this story. Did you come up with all these different stories of these different narrators and then kind of collate it into a cohesive whole, like you said, she approaches her journalism, or was it more reverse engineered that you had this idea and kind of reeled back from there?
So I always write chronologically, so the way that you see it in the story is the way that I wrote it. So I just started writing with the scene at the beginning where she's recalling the events of the day her brother gets eaten by the house. No spoilers, it happens
Yep.
on the first page.
Yeah.
And I
First
just
sentence, even I think, no?
and I just go forward from there. And whatever needs to happen at that point sort of presents itself to me. There's no sort of, I don't really do a lot of conscious thinking about the book. I did a lot of it sort of happening on the back burner, and then when I sit down to write, I write by hand. And
All right, right, but really?
yeah, so I just
Is there
kind
any
of,
specific reason why you do that? Is that just you take a notepad around with you just in case something pops up?
I mean, I do it deliberately. Like I sit down and, when I write, like I write by hand and every 50 pages or so, like I take what I've written and I type it into the
Sure.
manuscript. And then mostly because I'm worried that I'm going to lose the notebook and then like
Yeah.
everything will be gone. And then I usually edit it as I go. So, it started off sort of as a self-defense mechanism because I wrote my first book when my son was 2. And would put him in the crib and like try to write while he was napping. And then by the time my I was writing my second book. I was under a contract by then with a publisher. So I had a deadline, but I had a 3-year-old who didn't want to nap anymore. So I went to the park with him and I would sit on a
Right.
bench and like he would play on the playground or usually in the sandbox where he could stay for like 5 hours. And I would sit on the bench and write while he was playing. So, but I found that it works for me. It's a little bit more of a contemplative process, I think. It accesses a different part of your brain. It does help if you have legible handwriting. I went to Catholic school, so
Yeah.
my handwriting is very legible.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you mentioned there that the park, you oftentimes when you were sat in the, you find yourself sat in the park. That is
Mhm.
also something that appears in the story. I'm quite curious how much of the characters, especially Jesse in the story, would you say is a lot of you? I mean, obviously you've written the book and a lot of you bleeds onto the page, but I'm
Mhm.
quite curious how much of that you saw in yourself, maybe in retrospect more so than when you were actually writing it.
I don't really think, I mean, I've written tw 20 books. So, like, this book that's coming out is my 19th, my 20th will be out next year. So, I mean, yeah, sure, like, always some part of yourself ends up in the narrative, but like, I don't usually see like a one-to-one between myself and like the characters. Like, yeah, they might pick up traits of mine. Or like in the case of The House That Horror Built, which was the book that came out before this one, the relationship between the mother and son, I would say the way they speak to each other is a lot like the way my son and I speak to each other, but it's not like it's not us. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's sort of like the rhythm of like a parent speaking to a child and a child speaking back.
Uh, yeah, I want to speak a lot about the relationship, especially between Jessie and her mother, which
Hmm.
is it's a very I don't want to give it too much away, but it's a very complicated dynamic.
Hmm.
Pretty much everything I think we can say that everything that the mother says is in capitalized letters for a specific reason. I'm very curious where that dynamic came about and why you decided that that was the best way to work the dynamic into the horror story that is the center of the book.
I mean, I think there's this idea maybe that like if a tragedy strikes your family, that everybody's just going to come together and that everybody will just suffer together and they'll love each other more. But I don't think that's the way people are. I think that people grieve in really complicated ways, and that's a pretty key part of the story that Jessie can never get over her resentment that her parents love her dead brother more than they love her living self.
Hmm. Yeah, something that I that really not resonated with me, but I really appreciated was the fact that we really get into Jessie's skin and how she tries to she explains how she really wants to show her mother how much she cares and she loves, and she does understand when her mother gets angry with her.
Hmm.
She can't find the way to emote those feelings and ends up feeling kind of almost blasé about everything that her mother says to her. I'm very,
Hmm.
very curious where that dynamic also came into the story and why.
Well, I think too, like you see a kid who's trying to reach out for their parent, right? And like, but I think the thing that people should take away is like that her parent doesn't necessarily try to reach out to her. Like she has this understanding that, her mother is grieving and that she can't get over the death of her child. But, she's like, look, I'm right here. I'm right here. And it's like she can see that, she can recognize that, but her mother won't recognize her grief or her loss. She lost somebody too, right? She lost her brother. And that's why I think at some point she's just like, okay, like you've made a decision and I need to stop hurting myself trying to reach out to you because like this is making it worse.
Mhm. And coupled to that, there's also a very strong sense of guilt, not just within Jesse's character, but in the whole neighborhood.
Hmm.
They feel very guilty because they don't intervene at certain moments when they should have done. But at the same time, they're all very guilty of intervening at the moments when they shouldn't be intervening. Was that something that you maybe you grew up in that kind of a neighborhood, or is it something that I don't know? It just felt like there was something you wanted to get off your chest that that neighborhoods try to help, but at the same time they help in almost the same as Jessie said. She tries to explain to her mother how she feels and that she understands why her mother is like that.
Mhm.
Felt the same way. The neighborhood kind of they want to help, but at the same time they help when they're not supposed to help. So I'm quite curious where that came about.
Well, I mean, like the people in the neighborhood, I really wanted. So I live in the city of Chicago. This book takes place
Takes
in
place. Yeah.
my neighborhood, the neighborhood where I live. So it's called Wrigleyville, which is sort of a sub neighborhood of Lakeview, which is an official Chicago neighborhood. Wrigleyville is basically the area around Wrigley Field where the Cubs play, which is where I live.
Uh-huh.
And the thing I wanted to get at was this idea that I think people who don't live in cities have that like residents of cities are sort of transitory. They think that people move to cities for a few years and then like they decide to have a family and they move out to the suburbs and that like people don't stay and like take root and but they do. I'm one of them. I raised my
Right.
child in the city. Lots of people on my block raised their child in the city. Um, there's a house down the street where when we moved in 20 odd years ago, there was a gentleman who lived there who at the time was 100. He ended up passing when he was 102. He had lived here his whole life, and now his son lives in that building. So I really wanted to give this sense that, like, there are families that come and they take root, and that there are neighbors who know each other and look out for each other, and that, like, just because you live in a city doesn't mean that, like people don't care about each other. I think that they do, and that was really important to me. Um, and it does start to get what happens though is you get these little microcosms, right? It's almost like a small town dynamic where it's like everybody who's lived there for so long knows everybody's business.
Yeah. Mhm. Brilliant. Yeah. Uh-huh. And also I want to talk about obviously I don't want to give it away, but the house
Mhm.
that kind of eats Paul or Paulie at the beginning is called the McIntyre house.
Mhm.
Um, and it felt, I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken, but it felt as though it was based around something that maybe was inspired on something real life or no, not at
Nope.
all.
Yeah.
Completely made up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I describe the architecture of a lot of the houses in the book, and I actually live in a house that's like this. It's a very specific style to Chicago. It's a Chicago two flat, where like their houses are made of gray stone, the building I live in has a gray stone face and brick. And the reason why is because we had a giant fire here
Yeah.
and everything burned down. So like people, when they were rebuilding, you had to build with non-flammable materials. And so one of the things I wanted to do with the McIntyre house is to have this sense that the house doesn't belong. It doesn't belong
Right.
physically. It does not shaped the way the other houses are. It's not, it's made of wood, which it's not supposed to be. It doesn't belong. So there's this sense right from the start that the house shouldn't be there.
Right. Uh-huh. Yeah. We're talking about the house shouldn't be there. A lot of your stories, you don't like them to be in where you live in Chicago. I mean, you have
Mhm.
written some, but you said that you prefer to shy away whenever possible
Hmm.
from kind of setting the story close to home.
Hmm.
Whereas this one is like you said, it's set very, very close to home. Was there any specific reason why you wanted to set this one so close to home and also set a house, like you said, that wasn't supposed to be here in somewhere so close to home?
I mean, I've written now I think nine and a half books, I would say, that are set in Chicago. And I always feel free to play with the geography of the city. I use some real places, but then I make up other
Yeah.
places that don't belong there. I just love my neighborhood, and I think people, again, like I think there's, sort of like outside ideas of what Chicago is and what this neighborhood is, and I just wanted to show, this place that I live, like that I love.
Uh-huh. I mean, so kind of talking of the neighborhood, I mentioned earlier that it feels like Jesse's working like a journalist, collating all these different ideas, these different narratives. I'm quite curious how you approached telling these different narratives to make it feel like a cohesive whole because there are certain stories that I've read. This one's not the case, where there's all these different narratives that kind of lead you down different alleyways and leave certain gaps there that leave you kind of annoyed with the story by the time you get to the end because it doesn't kind of come to a cohesive whole. But this one does. I'm quite curious. I mean, that must have been something that was very, very much on your mind when you were writing all of these different narratives that could come across as kind of unreliable narrators, no, in a way.
I mean, I think you might be giving me a lot of credit here that I don't necessarily deserve. I always make a joke about this. It's kind of true. I'm a very half-assed writer. And by that, I mean, like, I just sit down and I start writing. I'm not really thinking about the story. Whatever happens, it's just kind of happening when I'm writing. A lot of times I discover the story the same way a reader would, where I didn't necessarily expect that something was going to happen.
Uh-huh.
I'm just in the moment when I'm writing. I'm not really thinking ahead and I'm not thinking behind. When I edit, I clean up, I make everything attach nicely. But when I'm in the moment, I'm not really thinking about that. And like I said, I do write chronologically. So all those bits where they pop up chronologically in the book, that's when I wrote them.
Uh-huh. Talking of chronology, was there any specific reason for the kind of the years that you set the certain different sections of the book in?
Trying to stay out of the cell phone zone.
Yeah, no, that's a big reason. But no, I mean, kind of like there's, I mean, there was a certain mention about Gacy having just met his comeuppance 1 year after Paul disappeared. I felt
Yeah.
maybe that was a specific reason, maybe why you set that. No, it was
No,
just coincidence.
yeah, it was just a coincidence where I was like, oh, hey, like when did Gacy,
Mhm.
die? And then I looked, I was like, oh, that works out. That works out nicely for the story.
Uh-huh.
Um, but it wasn't like intentional in that way. I'm telling you, I'm not that
Yeah,
intentional. Like I'm really, really not. I'm
you
just
know
like,
what your
oh,
secrets now.
I'm just like, oh yeah, like this works. That's great. But I mean,
Uh-huh.
the years of as basically I'm trying to I find it so I've done it a couple of times, but I do find it difficult to sort of write in the years where everyone has cell phones and can just take
Yeah,
out their
sure.
phone and like start filming things. I mean, I realize there are lots of writers who figured out how to do this, but I'm always like, well, why wouldn't the person just start filming this weird thing that's happening to
Sure.
them, you
Yeah.
know?
At the same
So,
time, I mean, it's great that the writers have figured out how to do it, but within the next kind of 10, 20, 30 years, that I don't think they'll have that timeless quality that books that are set in the past, especially kind of even further back in the past. Definitely, yeah.
I mean, I just think I do think it's interesting how a lot of times when you see it in film now, like the first thing that happens is like there's no cell phone signal because
Yeah.
they immediately have to eliminate the cell phone. They have to it because it's too much of a crutch for the story. So like, okay, well, there's no signal here. We can't call for help, you know.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, which was great about this book because I mean, I used to love. I remember films like The Ring and things like that. I loved because of this kind of the investigative part where they're going through all these old fichier files of the old newspapers and things like that. So this was something that I really enjoyed that you dug into as well here as well. Yeah.
I mean, I am a Gen Xer, so of course I came from the microfiche age. Like we used to have to go to the library and look in the card catalog for the book instead of just typing it in on Google. So,
No, but it worked really well because if I remember rightly, you actually kind of describe how photographs looked on the actual
hmm
fish file,
hmm
which just worked really really well. Yeah. Uh-huh. Coupled to that, also there's quite a few musical references in here as well. I'm quite
hmm
curious if you are very musical oriented when you're actually writing, because obviously you set these in specific years for no specific reason. But I'm
hmm
curious if once you've decided on the years, then the music comes into play and maybe certain types of music, because you mentioned the Black Crowes, U2,
hmm
Nirvana, these kind of things. Was there any specific reasoning why you went with those specific genres or those specific groups in
I
those
mean,
specific
I would say like, those were bands that I remember listening to around that
Sure.
time. But as far as music that I listen to when I'm writing, either I listen to instrumental music of some kind.
Sure.
Sometimes it's jazz, sometimes it's, like a film soundtrack, but mostly I listen to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
All right.
I just have a giant playlist with all Nick Cave albums on them, and I just pick a section, and then that's what's running while I'm writing.
Huh? No,
So,
I mean the reason I actually asked you specifically about groups is the Black Crows
mhm,
is the music that Jesse's listening to at the
mhm,
beginning of the book, and then because of things that happen, it's like Black Crows is thrown out the
mhm.
window, and U2 comes into play, for example.
hmm No, I mean, it was just the song that I thought of when
Right.
that scene came up. I'm telling you, like, it's really like I just think you're giving me a lot of credit for for deliberate placement, but like it's just
Yeah,
like, oh,
no, but I do have a very bad habit of reading between a lot more lines than I should do, probably as well. Yeah.
but I'm like, oh, she's listening to Hard to Handle. Like that's just what happened in that moment. That's what she was listening to.
Uh-huh.
Um, but it's not necessarily like a deliberate. I think there are writers who like make very deliberate choices like that, and they sort of really think about what they're doing when they're doing it, but I'm not one of them.
Well, it doesn't show, which is great. But at the same time, I think one thing that I think is very deliberate is that you have mentioned that gentrification is one of the evils in this book.
Yes.
That felt very much like that was something that was very intended. Was that intended? It wasn't something that just kind of
Yes.
happened,
Yeah,
no?
that's personal. Yeah, my neighborhood has changed. There's been quite a lot of gentrification around my neighborhood, and it really aggravates me. And there's definitely a type of person that lives around here now that drives a white SUV and
Right.
works as an investment banker, and their wife wears Lululemon and spends the whole day like getting Botox injections. That is like a type of person that is moving into my neighborhood, and I
Yeah.
am not here for it.
Okay. Um, I want to talk a little bit about your influences as well. I mean, obviously, there's some very heavy Stephen King influence here, and you said
Mhm,
that on many occasions. But I'm quite curious, what other inspirations, specifically because the haunted house genre is a it's probably the most crowded genre that there is in especially in horror fiction
mhm.
books. So I'm quite curious, what kind of touchstones inspired you, or you kind of you wanted to follow, but at the same time, how did you approach this to make sure that it was familiar, followed some familiar beats, but made sure that it was something that we haven't seen before? Because this is probably the hardest subgenre to bring something fresh into this specific genre.
So I think that probably the book that's like the single biggest influence is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. And that's because in that book, like the house is really the menace, right? It's not necessarily the ghost or whatever. Like it's the house who's sort of deliberately going after them. And, she describes the house as not sane, right, at the
Yeah.
beginning of the book. So I really wanted something in that spirit. And then I also wanted, I think, maybe like a monster that could be generational, right? And also something that you can't escape. So it's like every time Jessie walks out of her front door, there is that house. It's always there. She can't get away from it. The house is just always there watching.
Hmm.
So I wanted this sort of feeling of inevitability too, that, you can't get away from this monster. This is not something you can necessarily run from. You could stay out of it, but the house is going to try to get you anyway.
Hmm. Coupled to that, I mean, I mentioned earlier, I'm quite curious how you approached. Uh, I don't want to give it too much. I don't want to spoil it, but how do you approach this house that is so physically present all the time and give it so much agency? Because that's, I mean, that the house itself as a character is all already complicated just to describe the house, but to give it so much agency
Mhm.
and make it so believable, especially coming from a skeptic like yourself, how do you approach that?
So, I mean, you just have to think of the house as another character. The house has its own needs and its own wants and its own motivations. And the house has like before the inciting event of this book, the house has sort of gone through like a fallow period where like nothing too bad has really happened. Although I did try to imply that an accident, there was a bad accident in the house early on, like um, that seems like an aside where a kid like put his leg through a step and got like a really bad, almost bled to death.
Yep.
That's, it's sort of, I don't say outright, but that's definitely the implication there is the house needs blood, right? The house needs something so it can get going again.
Mhm. Brilliant. So, I mean, just before I let you go, obviously that you're promoting this book now, and I think you've got a few different dates where you're going to be kind of launching
Yeah.
the book in different places. Can you tell us a little bit about where we can where people can catch you?
Yeah, I'm going on book tour. I have I think 10 or 12, 10 or 11 steps. And all the information is on my website, christinahenry.net, or
I'll add it down there. Yeah.
yes, or you can follow me on Instagram or Threads at author Christina Henry, and I'll be posting about all the upcoming events. But I do hope that people come out and see me. I'll be in lots and lots of places. I'll be in New Orleans, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, lots of places. Mhm.
And besides that, you're also promoting. I think you've got a short story in a horror, is it a werewolf anthology, all
Yeah,
female authors, which you're also promoting, which I think comes out at the beginning of November. Is that right?
it comes out the same day as The Place Where They Buried Your
Same day.
Heart. It's called A Howl, and it's edited by Lindy Ryan and Stephanie Whitevich. And yes, I have a contribution, and so does Cynthia Paleo and Erica Worth and a bunch of other awesome writers. So people should definitely check that out.
That's fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. I wish you the best of luck with the release. I'm sure it's going to go down really, really well.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry I revealed all those secrets about you not planning it as much as I expected.
Well, I mean, I do think people expect writers to know why they write a thing, and I'm always
Sure.
like, I don't know. I don't know why I wrote that.
But it all came together perfectly well. So so no harm done.
Somehow it works out.
That's great. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time again. Best
Thank
of luck with the
you.
launch. Best of luck with the tour with the
Mhm.
book, and I hope to speak to you again sometime soon.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.
All the very best. Take care. Bye now.
Bye.
Have a good day.